French onion soup usually makes me cry twice. Once from cutting the onions, and again because it's just that good. Equally important to the onions in a French onion soup is the beef stock. You can certainly buy some pre-made if you want, but because there are such few components in a French onion soup, we're gonna make our own. We'll start by quartering up a few onions and then chop one whole head of garlic in half. Now we'll move on over to our stovetop and in we go with all of our stock ingredients. This here is a marrow bone, and the reason we're using it is it's filled with lots of collagen, which is gonna give us a thicker, silkier broth and French onion soup. You can build your homemade stock with whatever vegetable scraps you have at home. I like using the classics such as onions, carrots, and celery, but the most important thing here is that making homemade stock will give so much more flavor and body to your French onion soup. To finish, I'm going to cover this up with water. You want just enough that it covers all of your vegetables, and then we'll bring this up to a quick simmer, and every 30 minutes or so, you'll also want to come back and check on your stock. As you can see here, all these different impurities are going to rise to the top in the form of a foam. So what we do is grab a little skimmer, or a spoon if you like, and carefully just skim this off. This will make your stock nice and clear, but more importantly, remove some of those bitter flavors. The great thing here is this stock is going to work in the background. It's going to do all the work for you. All you have to do is check on it once in a while and just clean it up a little bit. For now, let's get this covered and we'll continue working on the rest of the elements for our French onion soup. The most important part of French onion soup is, of course, the onions. I've picked out 3 different types of onions for a reason. The first one is a Vidalia onion, and these bring incredible sweetness. Second, the white onion, which brings sharpness. And finally, the shallot, which adds complexity. How we cut all of these onions also matters in terms of the texture of the French onion soup. These larger onions I'm going to cut from top to bottom, just like this, and then I'll peel off the outer layer of skin and trim off just the very edge of the top and bottom. Before moving on, I'm going to repeat this exact same process with all my onions except for the shallots. Those we do a little bit different. When it comes to our shallots, we're going to trim off either end, and then, just like with the other onions, go ahead and peel off all that skin on the outside until they're nice and clean. Now we can chop. While I'm chopping all these onions up, I've got a question that I would love for all of you to answer in the comments down below. I'm curious to read all of them. What are your best tips for not crying while you chop up onions? Because I've tried pretty much everything. I've stuck a piece of bread in my mouth, which actually works pretty well, by the way. I've tried wearing goggles. I've tried chewing gum. I've tried using extra sharp brand new knives. I think I've literally tried every trick on the internet when it comes to chopping onions without crying, but I always seem to cry anyways. So maybe, my hope is that one of you out there has a trick that's going to save us all. We're going for a thickness that looks somewhat like this. The onions are going to cook for a while, so we don't want them so thin that they're going to dissolve and disintegrate as we cook. You want to get nice, even cuts so that everything cooks in a consistent way. For the shallots, we're going to chop them right down the line like this. Just get nice, even, consistent cuts all the way down. Once our onions are chopped, we can move to our stovetop to start cooking. I'm going to move my stock first to give me some space, and then into a heavy bottomed pot, I'll add some butter over medium-low, and once that butter's all melted down, I'll toss in all my onions, making sure to break things up if anything's still stuck together. It is a lot of onions, so make sure to have a big enough pot that it holds all of them here. Now, for about 15 minutes, we're going to stir these around to fully coat them in that butter and begin to soften them. We're not looking for any browning at this stage in the process. I'm also going to add a pinch of salt, which is going to draw out some of the moisture from these onions and help us soften them even further. And at this point, I'll go ahead and toss on the lid and let this cook for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, your onions should look nice and translucent, something like this. I'm now going to add in a bit of brown sugar, an amazing trick that'll supercharge that flavor in your caramelized onions. Now, once that sugar's in, we're going to stir this with the lid off for about 45 minutes to an hour until these onions are deeply golden brown and caramelized. My method here is usually to let the onions sit so that some of them get stuck to the bottom and start to develop some of that golden brown fond on the base of my pot, which looks just like this here, and then I stir and try to scrape everything up off the bottom and repeat that same process over and over again. It sounds crazy, but patience is the real secret ingredient to a great French onion soup. When you get a lot of the golden brown bits like this on the bottom, you can also take some of that beef stock and pour it over this, which will help you to easily scrape it off and deglaze the pan. I can even scrape up some of the sides here, and this is all just pure flavor. Some people may look at this here and think these caramelized onions are done, but if we stop now, we'd be missing out on all kinds of flavor. My main point here is you shouldn't try to rush these caramelized onions. This is the heart of the soup, which is why this recipe is such a good test of patience. By the time we finish making these caramelized onions, we want to get every bit of this crust into the onions. So I'm going to constantly be pouring liquid down the side of the pot as well, so I can scrape. If you've done this right, your pot should be nice and clean around the edges by the end. Fast forward another 30 minutes or so, and this is what our onions should look like. They should be heavy, dark, and almost kind of jammy. And the smell should be incredibly sweet, almost like an onion honey. As if things didn't smell good enough already, we're now going to deglaze with some white wine, scraping again once more to pick up all that flavor from the bottom of the pot, and we'll leave this now uncovered to reduce down by 80% while we go to strain our stock. By now, my stock has been cooking for quite some time, and we've got this beautiful golden brown color. Once we've strained our stock, we'll go ahead and pour it over our onions. Now things are starting to look like soup. And I'm also gonna add some fresh cracked black pepper, a few bay leaves, and a little bit of thyme, as if we didn't spend enough on this already. No. Now, we reduce our temperature to very, very low, then cover our soup and let this cook for another 45 minutes. Our goal here is for the stock to slightly thicken and for all those flavors to get to know each other. While our soup finishes up, let's prep our bread. You can use fresh bread if you like, but I'm using a day-old baguette here so that it holds up a little bit better in that French onion soup. All we'll do here is cut out nice, evenly sliced diagonals from the bread, which I'm then gonna spread evenly around a sheet tray, and then I'll cut this little clove of garlic in half and then use it to lightly rub down the top of each piece of bread. This just adds a little bit of extra flavor. This is not a necessary step, but it's a nice way to elevate the flavors in your French onion soup. And now we're simply gonna toss these in the oven to toast and slightly dry out a little bit. Moving on to one of the most exciting parts in the French onion soup, the cheese. As you can see, we've got 3 different types of cheese. We've got Gruyere, which is going to give our nuttiness, Comté, which is going to give our depth, and Fontina, which will give us that nice gooey stretch. And fun fact, Gruyere is from Switzerland, Comté is from France, and Fontina is from Italy. So we're representing Europe very well in this spread of cheeses. To prep them for grating, I'll trim off the edges of each cheese here, and as always, we're going to grate the long way. We want the longest strands we can possibly get with this cheese here. Longer strands mean a gooier and cheesier cheese pull. I'm not going to give you measurements for how much cheese you need here. I love loading the top of my French onion soup with cheese, so you should also make this as cheesy or not cheesy as you want. Once we've grated all 3 of our cheeses, I'm gonna go ahead now and mix them all together. My goal is to get a nice, even, well-mixed blend so that all those different textures and flavors I talked about earlier will balance each other out. And with that, our soup should be just about ready. To finish off our French onion soup, I'm gonna add in a little bit more butter. It is very French to add more butter like this right at the end of a recipe. And then I'm gonna stir nice and hard to really combine that butter with the soup. If and when you see any of those aromatics during this process, like the thyme sprig here, go ahead and take that out. Don't worry if you don't find them now though, because you'll find them in just a moment when you go to put them in bowls. The goal here is to get our soup nice and uniform looking. We don't want a separate pool of butter floating around the top. And as always, don't forget to taste. This is your last moment to adjust the soup. Make sure it's perfect before you plate it. I'm gonna finish mine off with a bit of fresh cracked pepper, as well as one more generous pinch of salt. Let's cover it up. Let it stay nice and warm while we get our bowls ready. To plate our French onion soup, I'm gonna add a tiny drizzle of sherry into the bottom of each of our bowls, and then I'll add a scoop or 2 of the soup that we've just worked so incredibly hard on making. We want these close to the top, but not quite there. We need to save a bit of room for the bread and cheese. My grandmother used to make a really good French onion soup, and she always used these little bowls here. So I wanted to honor her by making sure I did exactly the same here. I'll add 2 slices of our lightly toasted bread to each bowl, and don't worry if they don't fit. It's all gonna melt together as it broils anyways. And then, the best part of all, go ahead and top it off with some cheese. When I say some cheese, I mean lots of cheese. I want that cheese falling all over the sides because there's something about a messy French onion soup that just makes it taste better. I'm gonna spread these out now so they don't all stick together, and I'll finish each of them off now with 1 sprig of thyme. The flavors here will melt down into the French onion soup as it broils. And now, with our oven set to broil, it's finally time to cook. When I'm broiling French onion soup, my eyes are glued to the oven. In addition to not wanting to burn the cheese, it's also one of the most beautiful things in the kitchen, seeing that bubbly golden brown cheese on top. I'm gonna be quiet when I take it out here because I want you to just watch and listen. This is how you make French onion soup. All the crying was worth it.